So a very good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everybody, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us again. If you are back, this is our 22nd webinar. So if you have been joining us, all along the time, welcome back and thank you for your support. For those we are meeting for the very first time, I'll just do a very quick introduction. As Shirley has mentioned, I am supported by a team of wonderful panelists and they are from different countries. If you do want to know more about them, you can find out more on our website. And we are supported by Woody in terms of interpretation this today, in the Thai language. So do choose that if you need that language support. A bit of quick intro on myself. My name is Cheryl. I'm actually trained as a physical therapist, and I have been working with the brain for a very long time, since my kind of posting as a fresh physiotherapist, working with neurology and the rehabilitation. I'm a mother to two girls. I'm an author as well. So my children especially has given me real life experience in the nurturing brains. So BrainFit was started in Singapore but in the year 2001, and currently we offer programs in different countries. So here you can see some of our centers. So we offer enrichment programs for children from as young as 9 months to adults and also seniors. We run a preschools in some of our outfits as well. These are some of the awards we have won and some of our affiliations and partners. And let's get into the topic for today. We are going to be talking about the math brain. And we all know, I assume if you are here, you would have a child or a student. And math is the core subject. So it is an important topic. And let's explore that a little bit and see what the current science says about this part of the brain. And I will begin with having a poll. So I have 4 questions just on fact or myth. First question, babies are born with an innate math ability. Second question, finger counting slows down math proficiency. Third question, early math skills predict later achievement. And my last question, boys are better than girls at math. So do you think these are factual statements or they are myths? So I'm just going to launch the poll. And hopefully we get some participation. No right and wrong answers, so don't worry. So if you could, just give us what you think. It's always nice to have some interaction in an event like that. Otherwise, it feels really one-sided. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for all your responses. They're coming through. So if you are with us on Facebook Live, we're just waiting a little bit for our respondents, into the poll. Right, so are babies born with an innate math ability, true or false? Finger counting, is that good or bad? Early math skills can predict later achievement, is that right? And boys are better than girls at math, right? Very common kind of statement there right at the end. Thank you, we've got about 60% of responses, from our audience. We'll just wait a little bit more and then we'll close it. So we're coming up to about 70%. And we shall close the poll right now and look at the results. Thank you for your participation, and let's look at the results. So what we see is that babies are born with an innate math ability. So 65% of our audience think, yep, that's true. Finger counting slows down math proficiency. So 30% thinks it's true and 70% thinks not. That's a myth. Early math skills predict later achievement. The majority are about 50-50 actually, 57-43, right? So 57% thinks it's a fact that, your early skills can have a predictive value far into the future, right? So, and that's a pretty big statement. Boys are better than girls? Nah, most of the audience think, nah, that's not true. Okay, so let's look at some of these questions. So we're going to split this session for today into 2 main parts, right? In our attempt to answer some of these questions and of course explore the topic a little bit deeper. So the first part would be to understand the math brain. And then we always want to talk about strategies, some practical things that you can take away and keep them in mind. Either you have a child you're nurturing or you have a student you're working with. Let's look at the first part, understanding the math brain. So here we are. This is the math brain, ladies and gentlemen. So it's you can see when Howard Gardner talked about the multiple intelligences. So one of them was mathematical talents. So at that time, and that was earlier on, before we could look into the brain. So people were assuming that there was one area for math. So it turns out that there is no one area for math. Yeah, and there are multiple systems that need to work very closely together, and they are all important. So we'll go through quickly for some of them. I know it looks a bit technical and dry, but it's really quite interesting, right? So you have this spatial part of the brain. So this is the front, right? So this top part of your brain processes spatial information. So you're thinking of math in a spatial kind of representation. Then you have a part that's right at the back. So that's your visual kind of processing center. So at that part of the brain, you are making sense of the symbols that you're visualizing, right? So it looks at visual details. It helps you to discriminate symbols of letters, etc. Then you have your memory system, kind of your hippocampus. We talk a lot about that, right? How we can improve memory, which is always a big topic. And for math, you do need to keep certain math facts in mind, right? And certainly if you have those facts, in ready recall, you are a lot more fluent, a lot faster in your thinking, because that's just very basic. You need the facts to actually problem solve, right? So you want to be able to draw up the facts quickly. So that's your memory system. And of course, now you have the full problem that's coming. So here you have a huge paragraph. Somebody has some stamps. He gave 7 to each of his children. He has X left. And then if he gave 8 to each child, he would need 3 more stamps, right, etc., right? All these convoluted problems that our kids get frazzled with sometimes. So here you can see the working memory. We talk a lot about the working memory in our previous sessions. So that's where you need that system to process complex problems, to think deeply, to apply critical thinking. So, and that's really working memory that's powering all of that deep thinking and problem solving, holding different parts of information in your mind and then trying to connect them and then work out a solution while dealing with the information, right? So it's a very active memory system. So you can see here, all these different areas are active when we are working on math. And it's not only the individual areas, it's the connectivity among these areas that are really important as well. So scientists have seen that the thicker, the brain areas in these centers and also the connectivity, the better math, abilities and skills that the individual will have. So here I want to now talk a little bit about the developmental trajectory of numeracy in particular, because that's kind of like the backbone, right? The number sense, the making sense of a numeral, and then of course things build from there. So we're coming from right at the start. So what we know is that babies actually are born with the ability to do math. We have an innate number sense, not that they can do addition or multiplication, but babies are able to judge quantities, right? Small quantities, I must say, right? Maybe 3 items versus 2 items. They would know that it's different, all right? They are able to contrast what they're seeing spatially and make a judgment of that. So we know that, so that's spatial. And then finger counting comes in, right? So as the child develops, you start to use your fingers and count. And of course, that often is happening together with verbal counting, where you're actually learning the 1, 2, 3, etc., the words, the language of math. And as you have all these developing and as you are practicing and using those information more, you're committing more of them to memory. And at a certain point, if you have fluency, then you have automatic recall. So we're just going to go through each of them quickly because there are implications on when we talk about strategies. So it is useful to understand why we apply different strategies, And that's why we need to go into the science a little bit, right? So let's look at an innate number sense. This is a really interesting experiment from Duke University. This is a short video.
This is Duke University.
So right now you're seeing a 6-month-old baby participating in our numerical change detection task. And in this task, the baby is looking at 2 different streams of dots. One stream is always showing a constant number of dots, so it's always showing 10 dots. And then the other stream is alternating between 10 and 20 dots. And so the idea is that if the baby picks up that this one stream is changing in number, then he'll spend more time looking at that stream because it's changing more and is more interesting. So babies that show a strong preference for that stream, we think have a strong number sense. So if you're ready, I'm just going to close the curtain and dim the lights and we can get started. Perfect. So when the baby goes into the room, they sit in a high chair and then the parent sits next to the baby at all times. So then during the study, we ask that the parent not interact with the child. And then the study takes about 4 minutes, so it's pretty quick. So we had the same babies come back in 3 years later when they were 3.5. Babies that looked more at the numerically changing stream had higher math scores in preschool. So an exciting possibility that stems from this work is looking if we can actually train this approximate number sense and have young children and preschool children perform games that help them manipulate approximate quantities to see if that could lead to improvements in their math achievement.
Isn't that amazing, right? So you could see that by 6 months, they're already looking at spatial representations of more than, small, more than 2, 3 numbers, right? They're going into tens and above. And the interesting thing is this approximate number sense. So here, the babies are not even counting yet. So we're not saying that they can see the numbers and they know, oh, that's 10, right? But they're actually able to detect the spatial changes. So it's a spatial detection. And there's a belief that this is a very important foundation that underlies a lot of mathematical thinking, right? I just want to add that we have a wide age range in our audience. So we have parents and educators, who work with very young children and babies, right? But we also have post-secondary, individuals who work with that group of kids in here. But this applies to everyone, and we'll come to that. And we'll talk a little bit about the different age range. So we're just starting from the basics. And the basics is important for higher level math as well, yeah? All right, so now when we talk about a number sense and math in general and numbers, often people think a lot about the numerals, that means the symbols, right? So we spend a lot of time teaching children, young children, oh, this is four, right? And to help, have them recognize the numerals. What is probably more important, and as you can see from the experiment earlier, our innate sense is actually a spatial sense. So what is really 4? 4 is 4 apples, 4 bottles, 4 things, whatever it might be, 4 cars, right? 4 items, and 20 will be 20 of the same items. And 20 always take up more space than 4. All right, so at this level, a symbolic level to the child, it may not mean anything. It's just scribbles of lines, right? It's just scribbles, and you emphasize, oh, this is called 4. But the real meaning of that is a spatial meaning. And this is really what we need to get across to our children, because math is fundamentally a spatial subject, yeah? And so you can see that this spatial estimation we saw in the experiment, where we're not talking about precise counting or even knowing the numerals, but this sense of a lot or a little bit, or something is changing or not. Some scientists postulate that it helps us to survive, right? By judging, is it dangerous? If there was too many enemies or animals coming, do we need to run? So we have this innate sense that help us to make a quick judgment. But it turns out that our mathematical thinking is then built upon this natural sense that we are born with. So let's move on a little bit and look at finger counting. So what scientists have found is that arithmetic development, so your numbers, again, your sense of numbers, right? Your calculation, your operations, right? Seems to be formed initially through simple counting using fingers, right? So the child uses the fingers so you don't lose track, that it has already been counted. And it's very interesting that they see this, this counting with fingers across all different cultures, right? Even in less civilized societies, maybe more tribal people, very naturally they would use their fingers to count as well. And it goes back quite a bit in history as well. So it seems to be something that's quite natural that we do as well. And researchers have gone on to find more fascinating things. For example, now that we have these MRI machines, when we scan the brains of 3 to 13-year-olds, when they were doing complex math problem, so the finger area in the brain lit up, even though the students they were no longer using their fingers. So now we think of math as a spatial subject and also linked to the body, right? It's a kind of a body sense, a spatial sense is tied, right? To some, and certainly the fingers is that the part of the body that we've definitely seen quite a bit of connection with how we do solve math problems. And even university students, finger perception. So this is just sensing in the fingers, predicts their calculation scores. So our fingers play a big part in math. So no, it doesn't slow us down. We know of math programs are still forbidding kids to use their fingers, thinking that it will slow the kids down. So it's not something that we support with the science that we now see. So we encourage the kids to use their fingers to count if they are at that stage. Of course, if you're past that, you don't have to, get the kids to get the fingers to count. If you're at automatic recall, that's fine, right? But what we are saying is that fine motor developments are very important for young children, right? So in our BrainFit Baby program, you know, parents, if you're in the audience, you know how heavy we are on manipulation of toys and materials is deliberate. Right? The fingers are being sharper with all the sensory play. We are building math capabilities. All right. So that's finger counting. So again, a spatial sense and also kind of linked to your body, especially the fingers. Now, verbal counting is something that I think we're a lot more familiar with because we do that. We teach them what each symbol sound like 1, 2, 3, right? So with improved language as our babies are growing up, then verbal counting, which is kind of using language, continues to shape mathematical development. So you're kind of transiting from the concrete, right, where you have the number of apples, to abstraction, right? So you're talking about the language. What's 2? Right, there's a sound for it, there is a word for it, there's a spelling for it, but it links to that concrete, So you're moving a bit more into abstract thinking. Now, important point to note is that counting, like your verbal, like 1, 2, 3, your recitation, right, may not necessarily represent actual counting. Counting means that the child understands one-to-one correspondence, meaning that I have 1 item, I have 2 items, I have 3 items, I have 4, and I have 5 items, right? The last item I count is the total number, right? There's a concept. Whereas you can go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 without understanding that representation. So understand that if you're a parent, we want the counting obviously, I think it's important that they know the numerals, they know the names, but more importantly, the spatial concept is the base. Because that's what really it's all about. So we're at verbal counting, and then when the child practices and there's questions and plays with numbers, then you find that it gets consolidated into the memory system, and at some point in time it becomes a math fact that can be pulled up readily. So a student has mastered a math fact if they can produce an answer within 3 seconds. So it's fast, either through recall or a highly efficient strategy application. Now, fact fluency, if you want to develop that, it requires practice, right? So yes, you need to you work with numbers a lot. A bit of drills perhaps, right? But just on the topic of drills, it's really, really important when you're at the stage where we are storing math facts. So that will be early primary school, maybe By primary 2, 3, you're learning your math timetables. And it's important to, again, also differentiate memorization and automaticity, right? So memorization means you're pulling math facts from your memory bank with no real thinking. It's just 2 times 3 is 6. It's just like a statement. It's just words, right? Or it's just information, right? 5 times 5 is 25, right? Whereas automaticity is the ability to make connections. That means you actually understand, right? And are able to manipulate the facts and have the connection. So of course, if you are doing a lot of math, eventually it becomes you're just pulling it out like that, right? But you must always be able to fall back on the connection. So there's a lot of argument if you read on the internet. Some people are saying that, oh, we should drill math facts, the modern school doesn't do some of these memorization anymore. That's why our kids are getting weaker in math. And then you have the other camps saying, no, memorization is not the way to go. So I think they're arguing on different things. So the point is that we need math facts to be readily pulled out. That makes that creates less job for working memory, because if you have to still kind of do your calculation, what is 2 plus 5, as you're trying to solve a big problem, right, a word problem, then your working memory is very taxed, right, because it's got the whole all that problem information, and then you still have to solve all these calculations, these basic calculations. So we want speed to pull out these simple kind of operational answers, right? But we do not want kids to pull it out without understanding, right? So when they are forming these facts, right, it should be built on understanding and connections. And later we'll talk a little bit more when we discuss strategies for our children. All right. Okay, now this is interesting. So we've talked a lot about kind of like early developmental phase. Now, what about higher math? Yeah. So does a child, when you're performing higher math, all the information that we talk about, is it still relevant? So here's a headline from Scientific American that was actually discussing a paper that had been published, right? So how does a mathematician's brain differ from that of a mere mortal? So like me, I'm a mere mortal. Look at this. Processing high-level math concepts uses the same neural networks as the basic math skills a child is born with. So amazing, isn't it? You know what they found? What they found was that these networks that we talk about, the spatial representation, with your 10 frames, your dots, right? Your symbols, your math facts, your working memory, they remain the neural basis, meaning that when they scan the brains of people doing calculus, right, really kind of challenging math topics, the same brain areas are active. Yeah, so I think that's fascinating. However, more recent research, if you look at those who scrutinize a lot more, right, we'll see that they do see the working memory being taxed more and more. So that system that's dealing with problem solving, right? Whereas factual parts, you should be able to pull it out. Of course, it's still firing because you're pulling facts out from there. But what's really taking up more mental resource is your executive function, your frontal part of the brain. That's where working memory systems are. And that's, again, needed for deep thinking, problem solving, right? When you are really crunching through the hard stuff. So a comment on another comment, which I thought was really interesting on higher level math. So a very recent study, this is really quite recent, yeah. They looked at adolescents. So these were high school or A-level students if you're in Singapore. So they're sitting for your Cambridge, A-levels. So that's high school level, just before you enter university. So they found that students at that point who chose not to do math, yeah. So if there was a choice, and where they investigated, the kids were given the choice. So they chose to drop math, and then they scanned their brains in comparison to the peers who continue to take up math, in A levels, right? And they found that these kids had reduced brain inhibition levels in a key brain area involved in reasoning and cognitive learning. So there's also research showing that math thinking and reasoning, right, is a system that's very closely associated to fluid intelligence, right? So your reasoning center, logical thinking. Yeah, so there was reduced brain inhibition. So in this case, reduced brain inhibition means that, they were not so good. All right. And they saw that, and before the kids dropped math, the two groups of students were actually equal. So they didn't see that the kids dropped math because they had weaker, some of these weaker brain areas, but the result of dropping math actually created that. So there is, the authors were suggesting that perhaps it is a good idea for kids to go on with math a bit more, because other research has shown that the decision to not study math as an A-level subject, again at the high school level, can lead to an 11% decrease in financial income later on. So it affects your salaries, right? What your jobs, your careers, at least in the early part of the career. So there are implications, and so if you're in a country where kids have an option, you might want to encourage children, to go on with that. But obviously, math is may not be an easy subject for many people, and so we know that the basics, what we talked about, all that spatial representation, the number sense and the body sense, right? The finger sense, and going into your automatic recall. While we kind of think of them as simple skills, they are really the foundations that higher order math, is resting on. All right. So at this point, just to remind everybody, feel free to drop in any questions that you may have on the Q&A platform and the button at the bottom of your screen, right? Because often we have a lot of questions towards the end of the webinar and we might not have time to answer. So we have our panelists. So if you drop in any questions, you might be able to get some help with some of that. So then we have the two other questions that we asked in the poll. Early math skills predict later achievement. Is that true? I think we had about 50-50 people thinking yes and 50 thinking no. It is true. All right. So early math skills predict later academic success. So they have predicted as far as grade 8 is a paper that I've seen. So quite far along, right? That means secondary school, right? Your early math skills are important. So again, coming back to everything seems to rest upon a set of foundational skills at the brain level, at the academic school level, that they're seeing this correlation. So these research were really longitudinal research that captured the scores of the children when they were in kindergarten, and then followed up with them as they went through school, and really saw that they could see that the kids who did better in math in preschool were getting better scores later on in school. Yeah, so they could see a prediction effect. Now, boys are better than girls at math. 80% of our audience think, nah, that's not true. And you are right. It's a myth. Brains of girls and boys are similar. Right, so this is quite a more recent study, 2019, from Carnegie Mellon, and they found that the neural networks that were activated were not unsimilar, so they were similar. All right, producing equal math ability. So no real gender difference so far. We have been able to see at the neural or kind of brain level. All right, so now the second part, we want to talk about strategies to boost math achievement. So knowing what we know, right? So this all this spatial information, that we have to make connections and, recall, and that higher math is also dependent on that. What are some of the thoughts at different stages? So let's look at strategies in the early years. So we would want to really develop visual spatial skills, and finger perception skills. So it's a lot of manipulative play, a lot of sensory play. Like I've mentioned, we want the fingers to be sharp. We want fine motor, your dexterity, your manual kind of nimbleness to be there. Yeah, and doing a lot of games that requires construction, looking at spaces, shapes, sorting, etc. So these are some of our preschool students in our school, right? So this is a heavy component. And if you, again, you join our baby program from 9 months, we are already a big advocate of that because it's just play to us, but we are really forming some very important math foundations, yeah? We want to hone estimation skills. Remember this Duke University's video that we saw earlier, where the babies were able to judge quantities, yeah, without really counting, but they could kind of guess that. So this is our student from our playgroup class, just at 18 months, in fact, the first week of school. So here we are doing a little estimation activity.
Can you tell me, is it here or here? Have a look. Where do you put them? Here or here? Yeah. Do you put it here or here? We will put them. Okay, now here have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Over here only 1 and 2. So try again. You can put it here or here. Very good. Now next one. Where do you put this? Okay, have a look. Look at the cut of you. Good. Well done. Here or here? Very good. And this one?
So you can see here very nicely, she's already gotten the concept, right? So we're not getting her to count, but to be able to make judgments of spaces. And we know that's an important, the estimation sense, estimating the spaces. So that's important, yeah. So from here on is a breeze.
Where do you put this? Very good. Well, is it here or that? Which one? Good job. What about this one?
Yeah. All right, so you get the idea. So we want to develop some of these important kind of foundational skills. Also pattern recognition, sequencing skills. Yeah, math is fundamentally about patterns and structures. So this is AB, kind of repeat, repetitive patterns. And you want to get them in early. That baby, has the ability to logically, sequence something that they see. But again, to do that, they first have to pick up the patterns, right? And then be able to repeat that. Oh, Zorbit Math, yes. So this is another software that we are introducing, really, really excited to be bringing this, for us to be bringing this to our students. And so you can see, Zorbit Math is actually a software designed for children from K levels to primary 3 levels, so K to 3. So preschool level to about, 9-year-old students. So here you can see really making sure that when kids are learning the numerals, you're linking it with the spatial representation, right? And then here you have, kind of the height as well. So this is just a screenshot of one of the games. By the way, we will be talking more about this program in our next webinar. I'm really highly excited about that. I have 2 girls. One of them is not a big fan of math, and I can see that Zorbit Math is something that she's playing every day and asking for that. So we want to talk about, again, what is it that's making it a nice brain-based product, right? And again, exploring it as a potential solution, of course. For all of you, if you're interested, join us at the next webinar. Now, for older kids, right? So now we're in primary school. So we are, of course, hopefully all these kind of foundational skills are already there. And if not, you can continue to build them. Estimation sense, we build that, in our older children as well, right? Your visual spatial sense, all that can be continued to be built even when you're older, if we are lacking that at the start. Now, but however, I talked about the automatic recall. Remember that we contrasted between memorizing, kind of rote memorizing of math facts versus application of effective strategies. So these would be examples of some effective strategies. For example, if you say 6 plus 7 and you just force memorize is 13 as a fact, then it doesn't mean anything. But if you could pull it out because your brain was able to manipulate it quickly by making 5, for example, structure of 5 is a strategy. So 6 becomes 5 plus 1, 7 becomes 5 plus 2. You put the 2 5s together, then it's 10, and then you have the 3. That's easy. It's 13, right? So it's how we are getting to 13. Of course, like I mentioned, once we are extremely fluent, if you ask an accountant, they don't have to go through that, like breaking down. It becomes automatic. But you need to have a basis, in the process of becoming automatic. What strategy are you using? Or is it a brute force kind of a learning? So that's not what we want. We want the kids to see the connection if we need them to have a strong foundation. Making 10 is another strategy, right? 9 and 7, then just give the 1 to 9 to make 10. Rather than memorizing 9 and 7 as 16 as a fact, you are using a strategy of making 10 to get to this answer very quickly. Or using known facts. So maybe I call them anchors with my daughter. So we have certain anchors, right? Like remembering the timetables, like 5 is always an anchor. So 5 times 4 is 20, right? So if you're looking at 6 times 4, we go back to the anchor and then you might add, right? So your known facts, and then you build on that. Okay, so if you know for a fact 6 plus 8 is 14, then 7 plus 8 must be one more, yeah? Number talk, and this is, I think, really useful, encouraging students to discuss the method which they use to derive their answers, right? So what is the strategy? Like is it just kind of like, jam memorization? Or I can actually explain, yeah? So, and when you can explain, that's good news, all right? Most likely you've got the connection or made that connection in your mind. Now, these are some of our other apps. Like I mentioned, we are able to build some of those skills that might still be not there, in an older child. For example, rapid spatial estimation, the child very quickly has to judge, just after seeing this for a second, they have to judge which one has more, for example. And we have a math matrix app that really aims to help kids see patterns in numbers, but also to train automatic recall, via a kind of strategy route. So here, for example, you want to add, the x-axis with the y-axis. So 6 and 2 is 8. So if you know 8 here, this is 3 and 4. This will be 8, 9, 10 very quickly, right? The moment you have 8, 9, 10 here, you see 6, 7, 8. Then it will be one more than each of the numbers. All right, and of course, they have to do this under kind of speed constraints, yeah. But the idea is that you do not want to give kind of equations. You can, right? But that might then be more rote memorizing than having them see patterns in the numbers, right? Again, Zorbit also has to up to grade 3 levels, right? Really nice visual. I mean, the thing I like most about Zorbit is because it is so aligned, with what we know about the math brain, right? In really representing things in a very heavy pictorial manner, and then problem solving rather than going through math questions, which a lot of software actually, kind of go through the drills, right? But this is really just a problem solving. So here you can see they're asking you to flag how many to fit in, and this is actually multiplication, but through a visual, array. Array of items. But we'll talk about that. If you're interested, do join us. Now, what about in the advanced school years, right? So we talked about the higher order math, right? Higher level math, building on basic math skills, right? So obviously you want to ensure that there is solid grounding in early math concepts and skills. And in the event that these are not grounded, and the child is struggling with higher order math, then you got to come back, right? Because it is not disconnected, right? Where you are going into geometry and trigonometry, and calculus, the hard topics, like what we understand from the brain research, is still coming down to rest on very basic foundational skills. Now, by that stage, students really should be seeing math as a tool to solve real life problems. So it is a lot more kind of application format, right? Where you're not just learning, and memorizing for the sake of it. And certainly these are the traits that they see in children who do better, right? They're really seeing math as simply, explaining or solving problems in everyday life, right? And that it is understood fundamentally as a subject about patterns and structures, right? So using patterns and structures to solve real life problems. Yeah, so at that level. So, and again, of course, for any deep thinking work at the brain level, the skills that we are looking at, certainly coming back to executive function. So we're looking at working memory. So again, that is your heavy duty memory system, where it's lifting all the mental weights, as you are going into critical and deep thinking, and attention stamina, right? Keeping you on task, not getting distracted as you're going deep into a problem. So those are the systems that we might want to develop. So example, we have a visual memory game here. So you can see how it works.
Remember the positions of the symbol: tick, circle, or cross.
So you have to hold that in your mind, and we deliberately have you wait a little bit. So move the tick one square right and one square up. So wherever that is. Now that's not done yet. This is the second sequence. So keep that in mind while working on this new one. Now move this one square to the left and one square down. Visualize in your mind. So we're really stretching visualization there, and here you go. The two answers. Okay, so that means we're holding visual spatial information. So obviously, this is a grid, right? So it's a visual representation. You have to hold that information in your mind, and you are building upon it, because you have to manipulate the tick, and then new information start to come in, right? So that's how some of the exercises that we use to stretch some of these brain processes that are useful for hard work. All right, so that's good. I'm good for time. So we have some time for questions, but I just want to do a quick summary before we go into the questions. So coming back to the poll, with the poll questions where we started, the webinar. So babies are born with innate math ability, so that's a fact. So finger counting slows down math proficiency, so that's not true. So just to recap, so math numeracy development involves the innate spatial estimation sense, right? So that babies are born with, and of course it continues to be developed. Baby skills, I'm talking about a newborn. It's very rudimentary, very small quantities, and of course that grows as they develop. So it goes through innate number sense, then finger counting, and then the verbal system comes in. And then, there's language for the math symbols, and finally, automatic recall of facts, yeah? So we know that early math skills predict later achievement because higher level math, uses the same brain networks as for basic math. Now, I shouldn't say because. Actually, scientists are still really trying to figure out that brain, that stretch from your math facts to your calculus, right? While they're seeing that the same network works, clearly we know that the skills, the thinking that's involved are so much more challenging, right? But what is suffice to say that we use the same foundational networks, but surely we will make new discoveries. But so far, we have seen, that early math skills really give kids a nice advantage. It's also able to predict reading skills, by the way, right? And then school achievement. So so it is an important skill that we want to develop early on. Boys are better than girls, and math is a myth. The math brain has no gender differences so far from what we understand. And just to recap some of the strategies that we discussed. So early math strategies would be to build visual spatial skills, finger perception, your estimation, pattern recognition skills. So these are especially a core, right? Of course, I'm not including the counting, the numerals, because I think most of us do that, yeah. And primary level math strategies, you want to start thinking about effective and fast strategies. You want to train automaticity, rapid spatial estimation, a quick judgment, and also, using visual representations for word problems. Yeah. And advanced math strategy. So use math to solve real life problems, and of course, train working memory. I think that's all I have before I, have some time to take some questions. So if I could have all of you, if you would help us fill up the feedback form, that will be highly appreciated to give us. I always like to know, whether the content is useful and how we can improve things for all our audience. Right. So, and I believe there will be a link on the chat. You can click on that as well. If you want to find out more about our programs, please, or if you have questions that you want an answer to, so do drop it there so that we can get back to you privately. And the next webinar in 2 weeks' time, we will be talking still on the math brain, but we're talking about a solution, right? Zorbit Math. Like I mentioned, I think it's a really nicely developed program from Canada, very popular in the schools there, right, and among parents there as well. So we're happy, to have it here. Very brain-based product. So do join us if you are interested to look at what a brain-based kind of math solution might look like. Yeah, and yes, but otherwise I'll come back to this screen. And do we have any questions, Shirley?
Yes, we do. We have a couple of questions. Let me start with this one because I saw a few questions on this, or comments actually. You mentioned about using or perceiving math as a tool to solve real life problems, right? However, we had a few people commenting that some people, or maybe their kids or students, they just think that math is useless. They can't find the connection except for maybe basic addition and subtraction. So how do you help them find the value and interest in math?
I think this is really a very common problem, right? And I think that, yes, it is so true that many children, they don't like it. They don't think there's any meaning. I mean, reading, at least you can read a storybook and have fun, right? So you want to have good reading skills. But for math, what I think parents and teachers can do is to make it real. That means you are going to the groceries, right? So you're really counting, we're setting up the dinner table, right? So how many sets of whatever we need, how many guests are coming. So then they have to count. And of course, money, right? You're sending them to school so that they are really making use of, calculations for the everyday problems. I think that would be for the younger children. And of course, for the older children, then it's really more conceptual. How do you use trigonometry to solve, something complex, I don't know, right? A project, based kind of thing. So I think, I think that if we incorporate it in this manner, right, I think then it will be a lot more meaningful to the children, in why they're doing math. And actually, this is the other reason why I really like Zorbit Math. Like I mentioned, I've got two girls. My older one is in grade 3. She's not a big fan of math. She loves to read, right? She's very strong in language. She likes writing. Math, nah, doesn't see any fun in that. But I can tell you, Zorbit, when I started her on that, right? So it's something that she asked, Mommy, can I go into Zorbit now? I finished my homework. I'm like, wow, because Zorbit uses, you problem solve in the game. Right? So it's not about answering equations and then you get to play a game. So part of the game is using mathematical reasoning to solve those challenges. So she found that really interesting. So that would be a well-designed kind of game. So join us, next week if you want to see, how it might look like. But otherwise, I think the recommendation would be to make it as applicable as possible, and you've got to be creative. Preschool teachers are really good at that, right, Shirley? You know that, making all the numbers come alive.
Yes, like we put the numbers on the floor, get them to jump, and then you get to the final answer. I guess, like you said, making it as a tool to get to a solution that might be helpful. So we hope that answer those questions. Let me go on to the next one. All right, so we have an interesting one about age. Where did it go? Oh, someone said that I once read about children mastering math concepts only by the age of 9. Is there such a thing? Is it true? Do you know anything about it?
No, so the neuroscientists, right? We all talk about math being a baby skill. Babies' brains are born to do math. Like you will see statements like that, right? Like a neuroscientific kind of review, like early childhood policy statements by governments. You see this statement appearing more and more. Babies' brains are born to do math, and therefore, what are the implications for early childhood education, right? So these are very real world, real studies, right, that has an impact on policies. Yeah, so I think if you look at the science, and certainly if you look at some of those predictive studies, it's amazing, like how kids are able to, and we'll go into that a little bit next week as we look at Zorbit, because it's kind of for the younger age group, right? Which part of math in early years, right, have a stronger predictive value. So because of that, clearly math as a skill, and if you think of math primarily as a pattern problem-solving skill, then the way you look at it changes. That means it's more like your fluid intelligence, right? You're going into your reasoning, your logical thinking part of the brain, right? And no wonder, that is correlating into later achievement and even, careers, incomes, and all that, because it could be indicating a fundamental circuitry that's important for intellectual processing. So yeah, I think that I probably wouldn't agree with that statement, and I think that it comes very early.
Thank you for that. I hope we have time for another one or two more questions, because we have one other interesting one, because these days a lot of parents are wondering about enrichment, right? So there's a question about abacus. So will that help? Should kids learn abacus instead?
Oh, that's a very common question I get. Yes, and maybe it's a Asian thing, right? So abacus is is, in case you don't know, you have those abacus seats, right? So it's kind of leads you into a quick mental calculation, right? So I think abacus is good because it is a line, it's a visual representation, yeah, which is what we want to represent numbers and numerals in concrete manner, for young kids. However, now this is important, yeah. So if you look into the research of abacus, which I did when we were setting up our preschool, because I was very curious and thinking that if that should be a foundational tool that we will teach our young kids, right? So what you see from the research was that the kids who enjoy abacus or who could benefit from abacus, right, they tended to have all these strong foundations. That means the visual, spatial skills were already strong. If you use abacus, but these brain foundations were not there yet, that means spatial sense, your visual sense is not strong, then abacus becomes really challenging and dreadful for the children. And it was not able to be very helpful either, because so that means abacus is really needing on the same foundations for math. However, for the children who have those foundations, yes, it can be a useful tool to help them, be quick with the math facts. And you see some of the kids can be really fast, if they have been trained on that. But again, if the child is not liking it and having to drag themselves to classes and really, then you might want to rethink and come back and build some foundations first, right? Because it might indicate that those foundational skills are lacking. Therefore, it's not going to be helpful for them in that situation.
Right.
Hopefully that helped.
Yeah, I think so. Do we have time for one more question?
Yes, we have time. We have still 4 minutes. We will be on time today.
Time. So there's one interesting one. It's a long one, but let me just read it out. So, this person commented that coming from the USA but teaching in Asia, he sees a big difference in the way math is taught. In the USA, students are tested and then put in a math class that suits their current math abilities, right? But in Asia, but I do think we are starting to have some changes there. But it's still quite common that we put all the kids in the same grade level in the same math class, regardless of their abilities. And then, what are your thoughts on that? Because sometimes, in one class, you do have children who just fallen behind too far or fall amongst the cracks, and then they all have different abilities. Then the commenter is just wondering, what are your thoughts on that, putting them in the same class?
I think I'm a big supporter of differentiated learning, right? So differentiated learning is really kind of adapting to different children. So I think the separation of kids into the different classes is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is challenging, as a system, I think, to implement, right? Because then you need to have different curriculums, your timetabling, and Singapore is actually moving quite a bit into that as well. So we now have foundational math, or your higher level math, right? For not just math, for the different subjects as well. Yeah, so sorry. So in Asia, we put the kids in the same class or not in the same class?
In Asia, we put all kids of the same grade level in the same.
Yeah, I think not necessarily so. I wouldn't say that it's an Asian thing. Like I mentioned, Singapore, certainly it is a move towards that, because I think having kids experience learning at the appropriate level is always a positive thing. Otherwise, you run into two problems, right? The kids who are ahead will get bored. They will not be interested. The kids who are behind will get really demoralized. So I think that differentiating is definitely not the issue. And actually, maybe, while I'm here, I just managed to pull this out. I might just share something on the Singapore math. I don't know if anybody has any question on the Singapore math. But can I just share with you? I love the Singapore math, right? I actually had a slide, but didn't come in. So this is Singapore math. It's very popular. In case you don't know, a lot of countries want to adopt that. And why is it so popular? This is taken straight from my daughter's grade 2, end of grade 2, yeah. It's because it's really, I think it's a brain-based approach. It's really good, quite proud. We put quantities into a visual representation, and it's all bars. It's a model kind of format, right? Bar models. So you just use different areas to depict, how much you have. So that's kind of like one crux, in the Singapore math. But of course, my growls, right? If we have MOE people here, would be that in our lower levels, I think we need to have a better foundation. I think we load them with problems, complex wordings a bit too much. Now, if we do that, then working memory gets very stressed, right? So, and then the kids don't like math. So, and the confidence gets shaken. So my suggestion, I think it's a great model, but my suggestion, if anybody from MOE is here, would be that, we can lighten up on the working memory demand and just really get strategies in first, get the math facts in first, at least for primary 1 and 2, and have the convoluted wordings come later, also when the language is, more solid. So that, I think, can help children, juggle that working memory kind of being maxed out, as they do different things. Sorry, that's not your question, but I just thought that, in case, people are exploring kind of different methods. So that's one nice one as well.
Yeah, I think it's still relevant. And we are on time. And I just want to mention, because we have comments asking about math strategies and will there be other webinars on it. And I think what Shara has mentioned, that is going to be coming right up in 2 weeks.
Yes, join us for Zorbit. And I tell you what, I'm going to look at all these FAQs, those that are not answered. We're going to make a copy and then we're going to get that answered, because it's still on the math topic. So we're on track, yeah. So apologies, that we're not able to get all the answers in, but yes, join us in 2 weeks' time. We want to explore what I think is, like I mentioned, a very, well-designed program. Sorry, I'm not sharing anymore, right? I'm just coming back to the sign-up form, yeah. Yeah. Sorry about that. Sequencing. Yep. Okay. Yep. So we'll be looking at real concrete, like how do you want to build subtraction, right? Like then how can you build a subtraction problem, kind of in a brain-based manner, which is what I thought Zorbit did. So I thought I just share the product because the scientists got it all figured out, very nicely. So I think that kind of foundational problem-solving approach, right, using some of these visual spatial representation, giving meaning to the numbers is certainly something that we want to explore, deeper, right? So join us next time, and then we'll get some of these questions. I see questions on dyscalculia and, challenges. So we'll try and get some of these answers in as well. All right, Shirley?
All right. Yeah. So as Cheryl mentioned, if you didn't get to your question, you can also put a comment on the feedback form. So we are just going to leave the webinar on for a while, maybe for a minute, to make sure that everyone has access to the feedback form. So once you get to the link, you're all good. You can continue to fill up even when the webinar has ended. So we're just going to put it up for another minute or so. And of course, thank you so much, Cheryl, for the webinar.
No, thank you. Thank you, Shirley, and everybody, panelists, and of course, all our audience, who's joined us. I just take a quick question. I think I just saw one. The parent asking whether Zorbit can be used by parents. Yes, as well. Not just schools, so schools and parents. So you can subscribe to that and use it at home. Like me, using it for my child.
Webinar.
See some really interesting questions, yeah.
Yeah, I'm so tempted to.
We'll do it next time, yeah.
Yeah. See, we have another math talk coming up, so we can do it in 2 weeks. Join us. So maybe just for another few more seconds, please get to the form. We have the link in the comment box. We have the QR code on the screen as well. Get onto the feedback form so that you have access to our next webinar, and also you can put a comment or question over there.
Okay, we shall end the session now. All right, nobody's answering. Yeah, we'll stop right now. Okay, thank you everybody once again. Good night. Keep safe. Thanks everybody, panelists. Bye-bye. Thank you.